Hey everybody, welcome back. I cannot believe it's July. So as I mentioned in a previous video, June was insane for me. It was not my best reading month. Life was happening, people. It was crazy. So I managed to finish 3 books and start a 4th one, which is very, very good for me. So as many of you know, I finished The Gracekeepers by Kristy Logan, and oh my gosh, this is such a wonderful, weird, just totally strange book, and I loved it. I just cannot believe that this is a debut novel. This is a magical SeaWorld fantasy story about a floating circus and 2 young women who are searching for home. So this book takes place during a time when water flooded the earth. The people are divided into the landlockers and the damplings. So people who dwell on land and people who dwell in the sea. There's definitely some great tension and fear and prejudice that the author creates because of these 2 divisions. The damplings are kind of seen as like second-class citizens next to the landlockers, but both groups had to adapt and they each have their own opinions about the other. So yes, it's a post-apocalyptic setting where most of the sea covers land. But guys, the prose is so beautiful. I took so many notes. Can you see that? I just could not get over how beautiful the language was. The world building is kind of interesting. She doesn't take a long time to set things up. She just kind of throws you into it. So it's a little bit ambiguous. I sort of felt like reading this, once I finished, I sort of felt like I woke up from a dream or something, and I remembered all the important parts, but it was very fluid, if that makes any sense. Even though it is a little bit disorienting, you can sort of enjoy that ambiguity and that speculation. That said, I did want to know a little bit more about kind of why the damplings and the landlockers were so divided. There's not a whole lot of history there, and I think that's intentional, but I don't know, I kind of wanted to see a little bit more of that. Like, I wanted more on the rituals of the gracekeeping and just kind of more history in general, I think would have been kind of cool. But I also appreciate how condensed everything was. So again, it was kind of like just this dreamlike state. I felt like I was floating from scene to scene, from character to character. Definitely a whimsical, haunting book. I actually read somewhere, I think it was on Goodreads, that this was old school storytelling at its best, and I love that description. That's exactly what it feels like when you're reading. I also had a friend, Cassie, who is an amazing book blogger. I'll link her blog down below. She told me that she felt like this book was quietly fierce, and I really liked that description. So before I continue gushing, and this becomes an entire review in and of itself, this book is about a girl named North. I sort of talked about it in my book haul video, which I'll link down below. So North lives on a circus boat, and they kind of travel to all these scattered islands. She dances with her bear, whom she grew up with when her parents were still alive, so the bear is very special to her. The circus crew members trade shocking and death-defying acts for food from the islanders. Early on, we discover that North has a secret that could bring her life at the circus to an end. But the whole story, even though you kind of figure that out very early on, the whole story unravels very slowly. Kalanish, the other main character, I think this is supposed to be her. You can't see that, cool. Kalanish is the other main character whose life is kind of disrupted. She lives in a small house in the middle of an island. She's a gracekeeper. Gracekeepers were those who put to rest the people who died at sea. She's placed in this role as penance for a terrible mistake, and her life is just really lonely, filled with, you know, birds and fish and the grieving. A storm brings the 2 girls together by chance, and they're just instantly connected. That's all I'm really gonna say about that. One thing I learned after reading this book was that almost every culture has some sort of version of the woman from the sea story. Whether it's mermaids, selkies, silkies, finfolk, water spirits. There's always some mysterious story about a woman from the sea. You can hear these stories especially in Scotland, Ireland, Scandinavia, northern places with just a vivid history of folklore and the sea. Side note, I've also heard that fans of this book will be fans of The Night Circus and vice versa, so I will be reading The Night Circus. I know a lot of you have told me that already, but I'm definitely gonna put it on my TBR. The next book I have is The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. Oh my gosh. This book wrecked me. I knew it would. I called it, and it did. I was crying so hard when I finished this book that my husband and my dog came into the room and they were like, "Are you okay?" My dog didn't say that, but you get the idea. As I mentioned in my book haul, this is a story about two sisters in France during World War II. And it kind of just talks about how the war shapes them and how they shape each other. As a reader, you're completely transported into wartime France. And the whole book is about these just intimate moments of, you know, what's seldom spoken about, and that's the women's war. The way these two women are depicted throughout the novel, they're just so human. They're complex, they're fearful, and yet they learn to take on this incredible courage. It's just so amazing to see these everyday characters sort of expand and grow and become so resilient in a time when you're just on survival mode. I think I'm gonna be thinking about this book for a really long time. Okay, this isn't really a recap because I'm just gushing. There's just so much just unspeakable emotion. Again, so many notes, so many notes. I can't really talk about the scenes that I want to talk about without spoiling the book. But just lines like "the war lay between them at night." So simple and so effective and just so powerful. So one of the sisters, Vianne, I don't know, has to say goodbye to her husband as he heads for the front. And a German captain comes to stay in her home. Vianne has to, you know, keep her daughter alive and herself alive. She's living with the enemy. She's literally living with the enemy. Meanwhile, her sister Isabel is a rebellious 18-year-old when the book starts, and she ends up joining the French resistance. It's not a spoiler, by the way. She just risks her life for these incredible things. The descriptions were just so straight to the point and beautiful. For instance, chaos, dust, crowds. The street was a living, breathing dragon of humanity, inching forward, wheezing dirt, honking horns, people yelling for help, babies crying, and the smell of sweat heavy in the air. That's just so straightforward and honest, and it really puts you right in the center of the chaos. The writing also makes for a very quick read, surprisingly. Yeah, I really could talk about this all day, so we just need to move on. Speaking of the writing, this actually leads into my next book, which was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I listened to All the Light We Cannot See on audiobook while I was reading The Nightingale, and it was a crazy experience. I've never read two similar books of the same genre set in the same time period, and it was very bittersweet. I did not, you know, jumble the plots or anything, but it was just really interesting listening to All the Light We Cannot See and reading The Nightingale. It was really heavy. It was at times difficult to motivate myself to keep reading. Even though I was enjoying it so much, I think they're both just really heavy, dark books, and kind of put me in a little bit of a funk. There's just no way you can avoid being like slapped in the face with evil. And that's hard. It doesn't always sit well. But on the other hand, you also can't avoid being slapped in the face with just the resiliency of the human heart. I found the storytelling of The Nightingale to be very straightforward, delicate, simple in a way, but beautiful in that same regard. I felt like All the Light We Cannot See was almost like peeling away the layers of an onion. The story was all over the place at times. The language is just so descriptive and poetic, and the details are incredible. I do wonder what my experience would have been like if I had read it instead of listened to it on the audiobook. I loved the audiobook. The narrator was incredible. But I think that this is going to be a favorite of mine that I'm going to want to reread. And yeah, it'll just be interesting to see what that experience is like. Let me know if you've listened to it on audiobook. I would be very curious to know your thoughts as well. For me, the timelines were a little bit difficult to follow, and I think that says more about me on my end and how I'm easily distracted. This is not the kind of audiobook that you can sort of just go around and listen to in and out. I thought the flash forwards and flashbacks were really, really well done. And I kind of liked that this story wasn't completely linear. But anyway, this is a story about a blind girl growing up in France and an orphan boy in Germany whose paths cross in occupied France. Marie-Laure lives in Paris with her father near the Museum of Natural History, where her father works as a locksmith. He spends countless days teaching her how to live her life because she was not born blind. So he builds this kind of perfect miniature replica of her neighborhood and teaches her to be more independent. He helps her figure out how to navigate and memorize by touch and counting storm drains and things like that. So when the Nazis occupy Paris, Marie-Laure and her father go to Saint Malo, where her reclusive great uncle lives. And he is such a dear, dear part of the story. I loved getting to know her uncle. One of my favorite parts about the story is that the museum holds this very valuable and dangerous jewel. And I'm not going to tell you how it's a part of the story, but I just want to say that it was one of my favorite parts. This is not just a story about war. It's a coming-of-age story. It's a philosophical fable. It's about the human heart and the human brain. There's lots of science and math. It's very accurate and in-depth. It's about the ocean and what connects us all as humans. You feel very small reading it. I really enjoyed that about the story. I felt like the Nightingale was just honed in on these characters, not just the two sisters. There were amazing other characters. But All the Light We Cannot See sort of felt like you were like looking down, almost like you were looking down on that replica neighborhood that her father built. So the story is also about an orphan boy named Werner and his sister Yoda. And he becomes, as a young boy, sort of obsessed with radios and technology in general, and quickly becomes known for his talent with fixing things. And this talent sort of lands him a place in one of the Hitler Youth Academies. Werner's story was especially heartbreaking to me. I was just enthralled with the parts about Werner. I love Marie-Laure, but Werner has my heart. So anyway, that was a rambling mess about the books that I read in June. It wasn't a lot of books, you know, but for a crazy month, I will take it. I'd love to know what you read in June. Leave a comment down below if you've read any of these books or if you've listened to All the Light We Cannot See on audiobook. I would just love to know your thoughts. I'd also love to know if you've ever read two books, same genre, same time period, maybe similar storylines, and what your experience of that was. That's all I have for now. Talk to you later. Bye.